Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Japanese 101 Lesson 34, Gobi, Part 2. That's how I do too, because I'm, Central European. Anyways, Masaru-san, osashiburi. Today, we are going to talk about Gobi. We talked about Gobi last time. Last time we talked about ne and yo. So today we're going to talk about a lot of the others. There's actually a ton of Gobi. We're not going to cover all of them, but we should be able to cover a good amount, a good bunch, a good selection. I want to cover at least like another 4, 5, or 6 today. And we'll see how far we get. Luckily, a lot of the Gobi sentence ending particles are a little bit easier than yo and ne, because yo and ne from last time, you saw that they have like quite a lot of variation and they're quite hard to wrap your head around. As a tendency, a lot of the other ones are a little bit simpler. They're a little bit more like one-dimensional, I guess. They don't do as many different things. They just have like their thing that they do, their nuance, right? So we're gonna talk about a lot of these right now. Fight me. Nyang. Yes, gobi o nyan ni shite. So, I have my page here for reference that I'm gonna use, which we used imabi last time, so I'm gonna use imabi again, just also for consistency and because they tend to be very nice and very complete. So, the first gobi that we're going to talk about is an interesting one. We're going to talk about wa. This one comes up a lot, actually. So the gobi wa is quite an interesting fella because it has like 2 big variations, right? So just after I said there's not going to be too many variations, but the first one, wa, is an interesting one because it breaks down into 2 large categories, and it's pretty important to understand that these 2 are pretty different. So if you've been around, I guess Japanese or Japanese media, you've probably heard both of these variations quite a lot. Generally, you have one usage, which is a little bit more masculine language, but masculine or gender neutral. Gender neutral. So I would say that this part is sort of more of a tendency that's happening. In a few years, this will probably be considered almost gender neutral as a particle, I would say, or as a sentence ending. It's kind of a thing that's going on, like a progression thing, where as the years go on, more and more female speakers also tend to use this variation, which is a sort of emphasis, similar, similar. Is it with an ER or is it with an AR? Damn, English once again turns out to be the hardest language. Similar. Yeah, it's with an A. Okay. See, I knew that. Kind of. My brain knew, but then also didn't. It's similar to yo in its sort of emphatic meanings, right? And then the other one, by the way, we're of course gonna make examples for each of them. The other one is very feminine. Feminine. I guess I can shorten it like this. It's feminine speech, and it's also sort of an emphasis, but it's very soft spoken. So very soft spoken. And then often in conjunction with polite language, okay? Polite. Whereas this one is rarely polite, okay? So the more masculine or more emphasis focused version is basically never used in polite language, and the feminine version is quite often used in polite language. And then the last and also very important difference is in pitch. So the pitch of this version of wa is down pitched, okay? So we talked a lot about these pitches last time as well. そうだね、お姫様言葉、お嬢様言葉, something like that, お嬢様っぽい. So the masculine or neutral emphatic version that's similar to yo is commonly recognized by listening to the pitch, so you can listen if it's like a down-pitched wa, like it just goes kind of down at the end of the sentence. So I will do our usual sort of arrow notation, I guess. So we'll have like a little wa, and it will do a down pitch like this. And then, of course, for the other one, the opposite is true. The feminine version is generally up-pitched, okay? And now for some examples, okay? So, Right. Or maybe before I do an example, one more thing is that this version, okay, this version here, the more masculine or more emphatic casual version, was originally mostly a Kansai-ben thing, but it sort of made its way into just general language as well. But originally this was basically like a Kansai-ben version of yo, okay? And these days you will probably find it in all kinds of like standard casual language as well. Okay, so let's see. We have an example that we could make here is if let me see. I can probably make some space, right? Feminine, soft-spoken. Okay, I think if I get rid of this, we have space for 2 examples, one each. Then I can probably move this down a little bit, like that. Yeah, and then we have space, I think. Should be good. All right, now back to my brush and quickly deselect. So an example of this feminine version, let's do the feminine one first, would be something like, yeah, like this, right? Boop, boop, text field. I'm gonna have to change some of these text settings real quick. This one. Something like this. Sticky. Sticky desu wa. Right? Sticky desu wa. That would be an example. Sticky desu wa. Which is just like saying like, ah, oh, that's marvelous. And that's sort of very feminine in its tone. And you'll see that again when we look at the pitches, this is su te ki. Sticky desu wa. So it will generally be pitched up. Steki desu wa. You can see here it's used as this, so that gives you a pretty good indication that it's probably the feminine version, and not the more like the more masculine one, because you would generally not see this with this, like I mentioned before. Steki desu wa. And as a side note, okay, when combined with yo at the end, wa yo, also up pitched by the way. Steki desu wa yo. That's very feminine. That's like that's about as feminine as you could speak. Not even a lot of women use this. This is like almost too soft spoken. Like I'm pretty sure you're not even going to see it that much in the real world. What you will see this in, by the way, is a lot of media. So if you have if you watch anime, okay, if you watch any anime and there's the typical like princess style spoiled female characters or whatever, you will see this a lot because it's a stereotypical sort of way of making someone's speech sound very soft and feminine, okay? In the real world, you might not hear this all that much. You might hear it by like more of like older people, not super old, but sort of like middle-aged women, maybe in certain situations. It depends. In the real world, not many people speak that feminine. Like they might use wa, like wayo, it might show up, but it's not as common anymore. It's kind of a dying tendency, you could say. Now, for an example of the other one, well, really, but other than making feminine, it doesn't change anything like the meaning. Iwayo. Oh yeah, I guess iwayo you still hear. Yeah, you do still hear it. Iwayo. It sounds very feminine. Chawa. Yeah, and then in Chawa, I would say, isn't it more like the Kansai one, the other one, especially just Chawa is also Kansai. You'd say like Chawa, nanka, the pitch would probably go down in that one, versus iwayo. So like again, you still hear you would still hear wa a lot, but the important part is like which one is it, right? Which one are they going for? And then the other one that you would have, let me put it up here. You might have something like yeah, in Osaka, like especially if you go to the Kansai region, you're gonna hear it all the time. But what you're gonna hear is more likely to be this one, especially in casual situations. So like you might hear something like honto komatta wa, and it kind of drops. Honto komatta wa. It's like, oh man, I'm stuck, I'm troubled, I'm in trouble, something like that, right? I'm really troubled. Honto komatta wa. You might hear this. You might hear people say something like this all the time. Male speakers and female speakers, for that matter. So honto komatta wa. That would be more of an example of the other one. Oop, let me slide this down, and then let me just add some furigana for convenience, for your convenience. So first we have honto, and then komatta wa, right? Komaru. Komotta. Komatta wa. Komatta wa. So this would be more of a down pitch. Komatta wa. Now, there's nothing that says that this couldn't be an up pitch, right? Like this could be up, komatta wa, but then it would be the other one, right? So as an example that I'm using here, specifically it would be down pitched, right? Honto komatta wa. And then it would be more this sort of masculine, this casual thing. And as far as what the meaning change is, there's really no meaning change. These are emphatic particles. They change like the emphasis of it to be more like, it's similar to yo, like I mentioned, where the meaning isn't all that different. Here I would say using wa like this just gives it a bit more emotion. It's more emotional. It's like man, I'm in trouble. And then the feminine one seems more, it makes it softer, and also adds a little bit more emotionality, just like yo can. So in terms of changing the meaning, there's not that much. It gives it more emotion, I guess. Used in masculine speaks that much. It really depends on the situation, Rock. It really does. It depends on the person. Again, if the person specifically is from Kansai, you will hear it all the time. They use it all the time. Kansai is still super popular because it was originally a Kansai thing, but it's also pretty popular in just general speech. But yeah, if you talk to someone from Kansai, they will use it all the time. That's basically wa. I don't want to go like super into it because there's really not that much to talk about other than like there's these two usages, these two pitches, and that's basically it. I don't need to talk about these things here, so we can move on. If you have any specific questions, you think I missed anything here, you can still ask, even after I delete it and talk about it. But the basic gist of it is that these are two sort of emphasis particles to add a bit of emotion, to add a bit of, you know, emphasis, I guess. Emphasis is always hard to quantify. Urayamashii. Kansai wa urayamashii. Urayamashii desu ka? So I'm gonna get rid of you. Bye-bye. You too. Bye-bye. And then the next one we're going to talk about, particle 2, is an interesting one. We're going to talk about na. We're going to talk about na as a sentence-ending particle. Na is interesting because it has quite a few variations. Well, specifically it has 3. Bleh, I can't do the number 3. 3! Okay, 3. There's 3 variations of na we're going to talk about. So, let's get to it. So, na would generally be this, right? Na. Again, sentence ending. You'd see it at the end of a sentence. So there's 3 big variations. The first one is, I will do like numbers. The first one is basically a more masculine version of ne. Okay. I'll do standard color. The first one is basically a more masculine version of ne. Okay, so it does similar things. So when we would use ne, we could use na as well. So often also gets used as a filler word, just like ne does. So instead of saying like saikin wa ne, you could say saikin wa na. Like that kind of works. Or you could say like, yeah, something like yada na, yada na. You could say yada ne, which is the same as kind of yada na, but yada na makes it sound it makes it sound a little bit more masculine, but or can also make it sound even more casual, sort of a little bit more rough around the edges, I guess. As for a lot of you know, predominantly masculine speech, just sounds rougher. It's hard, again, it's kind of hard to quantify that, but it's basically what it does. This is another one that is slowly but surely being adopted by female speakers also. So this is kind of a general trend, is that language in Japan becomes more gender neutral over time, or more gender free, I guess. You can more freedom of either speaker to use either one. So, you know, language is always evolving. It's never staying the same. So again, as an example, we could have something like, you know, yada na, like, yada ne, yada na. Basically the same meaning, just one sounds a bit more masculine. So, let's write this down. Yada. Yada na. Yada na. I don't like it. I don't want that. Or another one would be something like Natsukashi na. You can also elongate it if you want. So when you have something dot 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 na, or, you know, full, right, written out na. Elongation does the same thing as it did for ne, like ne. It can mean, so it can sound sort of like thoughtful or pensive, or like when you're like regretting something in some cases. So natsukashi na, it's like, man, that is nostalgic. No, do not so much ne, that's Kansai too. Yeah, that's true as well, I think. In Kansai especially, na over ne is even more popular and even more commonplace. So in the Kansai region, you might very well see most of the ne replaced with na, especially in casual speech. This is also, using na in place of ne is mostly a casual speech thing. You wouldn't see it much in like polite speech. The music comfort today. It's the same music as always. It's always the same playlist. So that would be, elongating it is also an option. つまらないな, or 誰か来たな, like 誰か来たね, 来たな. It's the same thing basically, but again with the mentioned nuance differences. Number 2 is an interesting one. I might have actually talked about this in the past, but it really does fit in really well here. Number 2 is actually to make negative imperatives, negative commands. So after, Vili, oh boy, thanks for the follow. Arigato. If it's after, this is important. This is the only place where this can happen, is after the end form of a verb. I'm gonna make V for verb, okay? After end form of a verb, negative command. And I'm pretty sure we have talked about this. Wait, command is with 2M. Command. So basically a, you know, 手を出すな, exactly. The important part here being that it has to be after the sort of standard form of a verb. That's good, yeah. The standard form is sort of the important part. So if I say like 行くな, like don't go, right? For these I don't have to use text boxes because it's such short sentences. 行くな, don't go, right? Don't go. The emphasis being on the negative command. You're literally commanding someone not to do something, okay? 行くな. By the way, sort of an extra note, you will often see anything ending in ru, na, contracted to na, okay? So you might see this contracted to na. And that might sound weird now, but listen to a bunch of examples and you're like, oh yeah, I've heard that before. So a lot of usage of suruna, you might hear contracted to sunna, right? So it'd be like, for example, I don't know, what would you do? So like, don't study, don't do your homework, or something like 勉強すんな, like don't study. That would be an example. Or 食べるな could be shortened to 食べんな, basically like that. 話すん, yeah, 話すんな. You can even, sometimes it even gets inserted in there anyways, like with 話す you might see like 話すんな, something like that. So, but that's just a side note. These are just common and, yeah, ふざけんな, exactly. ふざけんな is like a very, very, very common example. True. ふざけんな, exactly. So that would be the negative imperative use, okay? Again, the important part being it has to be attached to the normal form, to the end form of a verb. You can't do this with past tense because it doesn't make sense, okay? Just think about it logically. You can't tell someone not to do something that they've already done, right? That doesn't make sense. You can't tell someone not to do an action if they've already done the action. Like that just doesn't, it just doesn't compute, right? So don't put it after the past tense. It's just present simple or non-past sentence ending form. Sometimes you could do like continuous forms as well. 食べてるな. Yeah, maybe. It kind of depends on the context. But if you're specifically telling someone not to be like doing an action right now, then maybe that could work. The general usage is just non-past simple tense and then just not at the end, okay? As far as pronunciation goes, it's often kind of a quick drop-off, sort of like na, and then it just stops it. So because you're commanding someone, your pronunciation will sort of reflect that, okay? Then last one, okay? Last one, it's probably the least... it's probably the one that people think about the least, but it can be used as a contraction of nasai, okay? Contraction of nasai. I'm not actually sure if we talked much about nasai yet. I'm not sure. Nasai is a imperative. Now, the really important part, hey Odin, konnichiwa. The really important part here is to differentiate between these two, okay? Because they are opposite. One is a don't do something and one is a do something. One is a negative command and the other one is a positive command, okay? Now the way to do this is that the nasai itself can only attach to the mas stem, okay? So if you see, that's the important part, right? If you see mas stem plus na, right? Is how it works. And Ikipan also already gave us an example, shina. So ちゃんと勉強しな would be like an example of that. Just like nasai itself, being a command form primarily used by sort of people speaking from the top down. Most command forms are used like that, but often when a person in the place of authority speaks to someone without authority, they might use nasai. My go-to example is always parents to their children. So if they're like, eat your vegetables, they would say like, yasai o tabe nasai. Especially the mother might very well say something like that. And then the contracted form of that from like tabe nasai would be tabena. Tabena. The way you differentiate these two is obviously the conjugation, right? So if it's ikuna, means don't go. If it's ikina, iki being the must stem, ikina, then you know it's the contraction of nasai. So that means do go. It's kind of subtle, but yeah. It's comes from, yeah, it's pretty common. Ikina, ikuna. It's funny that we had the exact same example there, but yes. It's the opposite meaning by just one vowel. So we can actually just use this as a nice contrast here. So if we do, instead of iku, right? If we do ikina, it immediately just becomes go, leave, ikina, go, go. Yeah, renyoke. The Japanese name for the must stem here would be renyoke. So when you have renyoke plus na, it's just a contraction of nasai. Okay, so you know, yatte mina would be an example. Yatte mina, yatte miru. We've talked about temiru, which is to try something, right? Yatte mina, try it, give it a go, give it a try. Yamenasai to a child. Yeah, you might, you hear this a lot. Like, especially parents talking with their children is like the most common place where I would hear the nasai in general. But you do hear it in other places as well. But it's, yeah, that's probably the most common part. Or, ちょっとこっちに来な. Come here, please. Ikina only used for women. I thought ikina was only used for women. It depends. I feel like it is generally more of a thing female speakers would say, yeah. Yeah, I think like contracting nasai to na is generally like a as a tendency, I would say definitely something that female speakers use more. Male speakers in that case are more likely to then just use the standard command form. So instead of like ikina, they would say like ike, right? So male speakers are probably more prone to then just default to the standard meireke. It's very common then. So yeah, ikina. That's the third usage. Eat me. だったら私を食べなよ. Yeah. So, 行くぞ. Yes, 行くぜ. We're actually going to talk about ze later as well. So those are the three usages of na generally. One being more of a masculine version of ne. The other one being a negative command. And then the positive command as a contraction of nasai. Alright? Cool. Let's move on. What have we here? This is pretty interesting, yeah. Oh. Where's my mouse? Oh, there. I lost my mouse for a second. Real life fitness. Thank you for the follow. Arigatou gozaimasu. So, let's talk about using to as a final particle. This one's kind of an interesting one as well. Most of these still applies. Most of these are casual language. Not exclusively. Not exclusively. Some of these can be used in polite language as well. これめっちゃ面白いな。あんがとな。So let's see what we can do with to as a final particle. To as an interesting choice. So My reference here, the man vulgar speaker. Yeah. So for to also there is 3 big sort of usages for these. To declare something, storytelling. Yeah, okay. So number 1, using in a question. Yes, so adding to a question with a high intonation, sort of like adding after a question. I'll just shorten it to question with sort of a rising intonation, or with a high intonation. Basically, it makes it more demanding, or it's like it says like what? It sounds more surprised. The best example is probably when you say like nandato, like what? Right? You've probably heard this in anime before. Nandato. It's a bit like saying like what did you say? Right? Nandato. You might see this combined with like an exclamation mark, question mark, because it's such a, I don't know, emphasized question, right? Nandato? Like what? That's basically that, right? Nandato? You can think of to maybe a little bit like its quotation function. Nanyato. Yes. You can think of to here a little bit like its quotation function. Like what did you say, right? Nandato? Like what is it? You can also ask it, so you can be like yadato? You're saying you don't want it? Like you say no? Did you just say no, right? Like yadato? Again, we're sort of quoting. It's kind of like using it as a quote. So it can't be used with ka. Kato. No, because kato is different. Because when you have ka and then to, it makes it sound like an embedded question. So like kumo kato omotta. But that's different with kato. Because then you will usually have like a quotation thing after. Not as far as I know they would use it like that. Nandaka, yeah. Because ka is like a different beast in that regard. But I think ka is both. I don't even know if we talked that much in depth about ka. I think did we talk about embedded questions? That might be a good topic to do if we haven't already. I don't remember right now. Good. Then there's I don't. Student casual speech. I'm not sure. Let's just do these 2. I'm not sure about the second one. I don't hear that much. So let's just do that one. Okay. Tosa, I guess. That term doesn't ring a bell. We might do it. We might do it then. That would be a good topic to do. Tosa, used in polite endings in storytelling. Okay. So tosa, I don't know. This one's probably also not super common, but Imami mentions it here, so I'll go over it real quick. But basically, just tosa as a polite ending in storytelling. The example they give is basically 二人で幸せに暮らしましたとさ. So the 2 of them lived happily ever after, kind of like that. I don't think this is something that you'll see like super often, but I guess it's good to mention. In general, I would say by far the most common would be this guy up here. Like this. If anything, you're probably gonna see this. Nandato? Or yadato. It's probably the most common. Yametai dato. Well, this is actually, yeah, yametai dato. That's dato allowed here because the action is a final particle. Yeah. Yametai dato is like very casual because usually you wouldn't add da to tai. But when it is like specifically the dato sort of rough question, then it's sometimes you might do it. Just like nanda is kind of weird as a question to begin with. Can you read the sentence out loud again? Yeah, sure, sorry. 二人で let me just 二人で幸せに暮らしましたとさ. Again, it's just like kind of an ending in polite storytelling. とさ, and like, you know, sort of like emphasizing that like, oh, that's how it went. They lived happily ever after. 二人で幸せに暮らしましたとさ. Basically that. I don't think this one is like super common, but you might see it. This one is probably the most common one. So good one to remember is sort of nandato. But yeah, you've probably all heard something like that along those lines. Okay. Let's do the next one. Gobi, 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 gobi. Peko, peko, peko. Get rid of this. Ah. Kureru, come to an end. No, kurasu. It's kurasu. Which means to live. Kureru is similar, but this one's kurasu. Kurasu, which means to live. To get along, to spend. There we go. Yep. So, next is going to be... No. No is a pretty good one. Become more, another example of a particle that used to be more female and is now becoming more gender neutral. No as a sentence ending particle. Generally, you might have two things, right? So either no can act as a casual question marker. I mean, I shouldn't say casual, but maybe like I should say a softer casual, a softer question marker. Because, well, usually you would say it in casual, because if you do speak formally or politely, it is much more okay to say ka. So generally in polite language, you have like nan desu ka, right? Desu ka. That's fine, right? You could say desu ka. It's totally fine and polite. The issue with it becomes that in casual language, using ka as a question marker when you're not speaking politely sounds incredibly rough. Like it's a very strong question. So for example, you would say something like taberu ka? Like, you're gonna eat? It sounds very rough. It's very direct, which is weird. Like, just because like when it's polite, it's fine, but when it's not polite anymore, it suddenly changes its nuance quite a bit. So, 何やってんの? Yeah. So, no sort of stepped in as a replacement there to act as a question marker. Note that it will have an upwards intonation because it's a question at the end of a sentence. So yeah, we could use any of those examples that people just posted. Like a very simple one would be 何してるの? 何してるの? Note that there's an implied E in here, right? 何してるの? 何してるの? What are you doing? 何してるの? If I say 何してるか, it sounds a little bit rough. This is something that male speakers may still say, primarily. Again, using this sort of question marker is either when you don't want to be super rough about it, or female speakers might also prefer it over ka, especially with casual questions, because ka and casual questions makes them sound really rough. Another one is parents, feminine. Okay, another one would be to sort of emphasize something. Do we have a good example of this, sir? These are all question examples. Oh, this is a good one. Okay, so we can use this. The other one is often called like explanatory no. So when you use no at the end without it being a question, it's kind of like explaining tone. Okay, it gives it a tone as like though you're explaining something. So the example that they give here is pretty good actually, so I will use this one. So again, this can sound a little bit feminine, but not necessarily. But yeah, I think this sounds feminine just mostly because of the meaning of the sentence rather than its like gobi connotation. But here would be an example. 強い男は泣かないの。Strong men don't cry. 強い男は泣かないの. The no here is having this sort of explanatory connotation. It gives the whole sentence this tone that you're like explaining a fact to someone, like you're trying to make them understand a truth that you believe in. 強い男. Okay, my O looks really bad. 強い男は泣かないの. This is, you could make this like even stronger if you just left it out actually. So if you did like 強い男は泣かない, that sounds very matter of fact. That sounds very matter-of-factly. If you leave out the no, it sounds more like you're explaining to them, like, hey, this is how it is. Yeah, toxic masculinity. True, but also, good example. 強い男は泣かないの. This is actually something you might hear people say. You can replace it with anything else. You can be like, you could also do like, something like, 宿題はゲームをする前にやるの. Like, homework is something you should do before you play games. Something like that, right? やるの. Do that, right? Explanatory. So that's that. Let me see. Do we have like any other ones? Oh my god, よく来たの. Okay. ゲームしない. 今勉強してるの. Yes, exactly. Yeah, you can also actually, I guess that's a good thing too. You can also use it to make something known to other people when you want to emphasize that something is the case, right? Like Odin, I guess ODN. I read ODN as Odin, but like how Odin used 今勉強してるの. I'm studying right now. You're informing someone, right? 時々泣いてもいいの. Yeah. So it sounds kind of like assertive, kind of explanatory in that way. So those are the two big usages of no. Kind of like yo. Maybe. It's, again, like this explanatory tone is fairly unique. It's what you end up with. One example also that you can do, by the way, which is almost like a separate usage, but what you can do as well as like a separate thing, I will make a break here because it's kind of separate. You can also use no and then add da. And this is kind of then a very strong exclamation, not an exclamation, a very strong statement. 食べるんだ. 食べるんだ, right? Like, you must eat or eating. It's like a very strong way of saying it. The reason why I keep this a little bit different is that because in a way, grammatically speaking, what you're doing here is mostly using no to nominalize and then use the copula to sort of make a statement about that nominalized action. At least grammatically, that's what's happening. You can also use noka, which then ironically again makes it a very strong question. Like, やんのか? You wanna go? You wanna fight? Noka? That's a very strong question. It's pretty provocative in the way it sounds. Like, noka? It's like, you have a problem? 問題あんのか? You'd often see this also contracting, again, like contracting the r to n is very common in those kinds of phrases. Like, やるのか? But you'd say like, やんのか? Or 問題あんのか? Like, do you have a problem? あるのか? Sort of contracting to のか. 時々泣いてもいいのはよな. That's a bit much. I don't think you would say that, but yeah. So that would be like two more examples of implementing or including no. Hey, Freka. How you doing? Yeah, okay. Let me get rid of all of this. That would be no. No, 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 no. No, 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 no. These are mostly things you can like bullet point down a bunch of the notes, right, for each of them, and then kind of try and listen if you can hear them in daily conversation or whatever, and then just sort of get a feeling for how to use them over time. As with every Gobi that we've talked about so far, this is mostly up to getting used to how it's actually used. There's no way that I can fit the full breadth of how Gobi are used into like a 1 hour lesson, or even 2 of them. Inoa sounds weird to think. Yeah, you wouldn't say Noah generally. Please call me Odin. Odin, I will do that, Odin. Okay. Wait, let me drink. Water. Yes. The juice of life. The Gobi spectrum, exactly. Okay, here's another good one. んだよな. So, yeah. It's common though. Yeah, you wouldn't say like Noah generally, because that sounds a lot like you're trying to use it as a relative clause, right? Like Noah works, but it sounds more like you're trying to say like clause Noah, and then you want to keep going as far as the pattern is concerned. But yeah. Ooh, what am I doing? Jesus. Big yabai. There we go. I made a hole in the fabric of reality. Whew, yikes. I'm gonna stop doing that. Next one is an interesting one. This is one that I talk about quite frequently actually when it comes up. Sa. as a sentence ending particle? What is sa as a sentence ending particle? Well, one way I often explain sa actually is kind of like adding in English. So in English, when we have a sentence and we want to sort of, empathize, or we want other people to empathize with us, or we want to like make them understand, we might add we might say our sentence and then we might add something like, So an example of that would be, Wanderlust, thank you for the follow. ありがとうございます. An example of that might be like, oh, by the way, this can show up in different places of the sentence. It doesn't necessarily have to be at the end. So one example would be something like, say I want to explain to you what happened last weekend. I was like, last weekend. And I could sort of use sa in that context, where I would say something like, I'd do something like, 先週末はさ. It's like, last weekend. It's sort of like you're bringing this up. You're asking for sort of, generally it's to ask for emphasis, I would say. But it's this nuance of, or like. As a filler word, in general, sa can also kind of function a little bit like. So how would we say something like, たけしはさ 昨日さ you can add it to almost every word in the sentence, and it kind of works. So like, Takeshi, he like talked to me yesterday or something like, when we had a conversation. たけしはさ昨日さそのね会話したさでさあいつはさ it's like you can actually do it as much as you want. It has the same effect as it does in English when you keep saying like, where you're like, get to the point, but it's similar in that regard. あのさ yeah, あのさ is another example. 声で会話するときさ、言う言葉見つからないときさ、さっとよく言うじゃん。そうそう。Yeah, exactly. Too many sa. Do you like to read Japanese novels to study Japanese? Yes, I would like to read a little bit more, but recently I've just not been as motivated to do my reading. So the answer is yes. I like to do that, but I've been lazy recently. But yeah, that's a very good way to study, I think. So let me just write down some of the examples for you so we can look at them. So Tokyo, these are a bit longer, so I'm just gonna write them with the text tool. Tokyo, 東京は本当に綺麗さ。綺麗さ. So like, well, we could have a full stop or an exclamation mark or whatever. 東京は本当に綺麗さ. It's like, like Tokyo is like really pretty. Or something like that, right? I don't know if I need to add furigana to these. 綺麗,綺麗, but we can do 綺麗 without kanji, then it's a little bit easier to read. The other ones I hope you know, Tokyo and 本当 is good words to know. And then maybe another one. This is kind of a longer example. Yeah, this is another example that kind of shows that sort of filler word characteristic. So you would say 明日はさ. What's especially common is to find sa immediately after the topic. Just like here, 明日はさ. This is extremely common. And then 土曜日だからさ. 休みなんだ. So like tomorrow. You would translate this like tomorrow is like tomorrow it's like Saturday, which is a day off, It's like that. なんだ. This is very casual speech. You would not do this in an essay, okay? This is definitely not the kind of language that you can use in an essay. These are casual words. They're for emphasis. They're for like seeking or showing empathy. Yasumi nanda. What are frogs? Does anyone know that clip? That's a great clip. It's to show or to seek empathy from other people. It's a very much a conversation kind of thing. Not something that you use in essays, definitely. It's like you're saying, hey, now listen up. 聞いてさ? You can also just like, when you really want someone's attention, like, 聞いてよ. Well, it's kind of like yo as well. Yo works even more because it sounds really like you're seeking someone. Like, 聞いてよ. Come on, listen. But yeah, this is this 明日はさ. I really like to think of it as So, yes, tomorrow, you know? Like, tomorrow, you know? It's like Saturday? Yeah. You can imagine like a Valley Girl accent if you want to. So tomorrow, it's like Saturday, and Bob, you know, he like totally ditched me, which is so not cool. Anyways, if you want to think about it like that, maybe that helps. That's like totally not cool, okay? There you go. I personally went through a whole phase where I tried to delete the word like from my vocab because I tend to say it a lot. When I don't know, my go-to filler word in English is definitely like, and I had a pretty long period of time where I was seriously trying to reduce my usage of it, and now I'm at a point where I feel like I don't use it much at all anymore, and we're good. We're good, but sometimes when I'm thinking, I still use it a lot. When I'm like trying to form a sentence as I go, like I don't already have one, I don't have one prepared, I'm like still formulating my thought, I'll still use it a lot. So I'd be like, you know, when you're like talking to someone and they're like trying to explain you something, don't you like sometimes think that it's really bad, okay? Don't do it. Ladies and gentlemen, don't be me, okay? And use like too much because it makes you sound like an idiot. So yeah, and the funny thing is it bothers me when other people do it too, because I try to pay so much attention to when I do it so that I can get rid of it, that now I notice it with other people as well. And it bothers me a lot. Not if you can use it, of course, like I'm not like gonna tell you not to, but if you do it like all the time, I'm probably gonna notice and get annoyed internally. What's your mother tongue? English? No, my native language is German. The next one we're gonna talk about is ze. Ze is kind of a pretty specific one, I guess. So ze, I'm just gonna use some like bullet point style things, so you can kind of think of it as it's a pretty. Now I don't like to use the word rude, so maybe let's think of it as a rough expression. So rough, it's a pretty rough expression. It's kind of masculine again, masculine, but not exclusively. Just like most of the gendered, most of the like. I don't want to call them gender specific because you can now use them no matter which, no matter if you are more like identify as female or male. Again, this is a general trend. Most of these that used to be super one-sided can now kind of be used by both. There's still strong tendencies to either direction, but the walls are kind of breaking down. Okay, but yeah, rough masculine language. It pushes an idea. Okay. Pushes an idea. Yeah, you should never use this with superiors, okay? Not to be used with superiors. Superiors. Okay, what that means is, you know, we're talking Japanese, so if you talk to someone that is sort of higher up than you in the hierarchy of whatever, like a senpai, you would never use this, okay? Or you would definitely avoid it. Funny enough, Imabi also lists, it is only appropriate in casual conversation, should never be used with your superiors in a typical situation. Only if you and your superiors are drunk should you ever use it. That is unless you're quitting. That's kind of true, yeah. If you want to quit your job, then I guess it doesn't really matter. That means it's like, so ignore. Yes. 腹減ったぜ。一人行こうぜ。一人行こうぜ。Ah. Wait. This is 1. Did you want to write like hitokari or hitogari? Because you wrote ichi, but I don't think that's what you meant. Let's not go hunting for humans. That's a bad idea. So yeah, don't use it like that. It is basically like a manly version of an exclamation point, okay? And you've probably all heard it before. So one would be ikuze, but more often this will often be used with volitional. Often used with volitional. Volitional being 行こう! やろう! Let's go! Hitorikari. Monster Hunt tagline for a long time. Oh, hitorikari. Hitokari. Hitokari. So when you're hunting alone. Okay. That does make sense in the context of the game. Konnichiwa, Yafumi-san. Let's make an example, right? So you might have the simple version, which has already been like mentioned. Ikoze. Let's go. Ikoze. Let's go. All the points apply. It's pretty rough. It's pretty masculine. It pushes the idea. It's like, yeah. You sound very motivated. There you go. Recent experience. What is another one? You can also use it to make sort of exclamatory. What do you call it? Like statements. Like what about ze versus zo? So we're gonna talk about zo next. Okay, we're gonna talk about zo next. Ze versus zo is kind of tricky. I would say ze is more like pushing an idea here, like the way they say, right? Like ikoze. It's like you're trying to get across this idea. How would I differentiate between zo? So you wouldn't say ikozo, right? You wouldn't say that. You would say ikuzo. I feel like zo more has this sort of I'm informing you of something kind of tone, whereas ze is more like hyping you up. But I'd have to think about it. We might see some more notes here on the thing that I use for reference. So that might be a good thing. So that would be ze. Another one, right? You might see like ikuze, ikuze. Let's go. That's also kind of like let's go. And then yuki daze. Oops, yuka daze. It's the floor. Yuki daze. Yuki daze. It's snow. Look, it's snow. Like you're I would say like ze is kind of like a thing you use when you're like hyping someone up or you're hyped up or something like that. It's generally like this. Sounds very motivated. Yare yare daze. Like I guess yare yare doesn't sound very hyped, but yeah. Sort of this rudely or forcefully pushing an idea. I guess that makes sense. Again, these are hard to put into words, but you'll probably get the hang of it eventually. The more you use it. So let's talk about zo. 沖縄弁で狩人をかりんちゅというよ。かりんちゅ。It's great for sounding like a middle school boy. That's true, yeah. They're excited about everything, so it makes sense. Let me delete this speech bubble. Speech bubble. Spongy bubble. No, I didn't want to make a new one. Go away. Be gone. There we go. Next is zo. And that's actually going to be our last one too. Zo. What's zo? Zo. Zo. Another one it's difficult to explain Gobi correctly even for Japanese. Yeah, it's more of like a feeling thing, right? It's I mentioned this last time as well when we did Gobi part 1. Gobi are more about conveying feelings and emotional nuances than anything else. They don't generally change the meaning of the sentence much, but they change the emotion of the sentence. But these things are very, very hard to explain, sort of by nature. Emotions, no one understands them. So, Flavor Flav does it. Ze is, again, pretty harsh, pretty rough. Rough, harsh, kind of a harsh thing to say. And once again, generally still associated with masculine speech. Masculine, which again in modern times isn't like an exclusive thing anymore. You might see female speakers use it as well, depending on the situation and depending on how they want to come across. So it's assertive. It's very assertive, okay? Oh, this is a good point. It's used in rhetorical questions sometimes. That makes sense. Rhetorical questions. It's sometimes used in rhetorical questions. Sorks, konbanwa. Strongly masculine, still frequently, just not with as much gender baggage. You do not use this in polite speech. Yeah, and it's rough. It's a sort of don't use it in polite speech. Once again, not something to use. The tour campers, thanks for the follow. Follow, arigatou gozaimasu. Ikuzo! Sometimes, and that's a good benchmark for normal Japanese. Yeah, as far as like normal child Japanese is concerned, yeah. You should probably not talk exactly like Yotsuba does because you'll sound like a, what? Like 5-year-old? 6-year-old? I don't know. Is she 4, 5, 6? I forgot how old she is. Lurking and learning. Yes, yes. Very good. those are my two favorite L words. So let's just make some examples, right? So you can use it. Let's talk about like maybe how does it work as like an assertive kind of particle or gobi. Like this would be one, right? She's really young. I forgot how young she is. She's under 10, I think. She's like 6 or something. 今しないと for some reason I thought 10 to 12. Maybe I'm wrong. Listen, I might be wrong. 今しないと失敗するぞ. 失敗するぞ. Right? If you don't do it now, you will fail. You're gonna fail. If you don't do it now, you're going to fail. Like sounds very assertive. It's like I'm really, I'm not screwing around. I'm telling you 5 Google says that. Maybe at the start of the manga, I think she may be like a year or two older by the time you get to volume whatever it is, 12. I don't know though. So 今しないと失敗するぞ. If you don't do it now, you will fail. So this is sort of this assertive meaning, right? We're definitely asserting a certain truth. It also sounds very like, I guess, I don't know if I should say authoritarian. That makes it sound so political. It's kind of speaking with kind of a lot of authority also, like saying like, you're very self-assured. It's assertive, it's self-assured. It's like saying like, yeah, authoritative. Yeah, it's like, for some reason, authoritative is better. Yeah, authoritarian is more like politically charged, I suppose. 今しないと失敗するぞ. Like if you don't do it now, you will fail. Another one is when you're do we have anyone for like rhetorical questions? I'm not quite sure. Rhetorical questions would be like, I'm not quite sure with the rhetorical questions. This was mentioned here and it kind of sounds right, but I have to think of an example and they don't list one. So I'm trying to think, but I'm not sure if I can come up with one on the spot. Maybe I will, maybe I won't. Maybe another example that we can do is するぞ. するぞ. Another one would be something like なんか or 何か, I guess. 何か変だぞ. These are very sort of so these are like sentences you see a lot in anime and stuff. クレヨンしんちゃんのしんちゃんが語尾にぞをつける. So nice. I guess I am. Because I'm trying to think. そんなもん誰が聞く? そんなもん誰が聞きそう? I don't know. I'm not sure. But another one you might say like なんか変だぞ. Something's weird. In general, I would say the main nuance to keep in mind for ぞ is like its assertiveness. It just sounds very assertive and very self-assured. Has this like authority to it. And this roughness. Again, the difference between ぞ and ぜ is very hard to explain. But generally, you don't use, how would I say? So, 行くぞ. You can say 行くぞ, but you can't say 行こうぞ. Like 行こうぞ is kind of weird. You would say 行こうぜ, but not 行こうぞ. Ah, man. Rhetorical questions, right? Yeah. It also says here that using ぞ for making a rhetorical question is rather archaic. That's probably true. So let's do this more like in brackets, okay? It's more of an archaic usage. So you might still see it. あいつは何者ぞ. 自分に言い聞かせるときにぞをつけるかな? Yeah, I guess when you're like trying to hype yourself up as well, or like when you're trying to say it to yourself. So yeah. Okay. I'd have to like think about it. Maybe we can find a good explanation. Wait. Japanese ぞ and ぜ difference. Because maybe someone has already formulated a better answer here. Difference that almost died out. Yeah, they're very similar. Straightforwardly tells one-sided subject. Claims this functions more confirmation, request advice in a rude, free manner. And there's no here. Couldn't be used if there's no here, if you wouldn't speak. Yeah, okay, that kind of makes sense. I guess ぜ is generally more for like informing someone else, like conveying some information to someone else as well. This person here says that you wouldn't really use ぜ if there wasn't a hearer, there wasn't a listener that you're talking to. So like you wouldn't say Gambaruze. Like, you wouldn't say that to yourself. You'd be more likely to say gambaruzo, like to yourself, maybe. Like in hitorioto, you're probably more likely to use that. But they are definitely pretty similar. My advice for now is to probably not worry about it. You will probably pick up which is natural to use over time. That's always kind of how it has to go. 今日も一日頑張るぞい. Yeah, zoi is of course the most important gobi that ever existed. Alright. Yeah. Zo and ze are pretty similar. It's pretty hard to pinpoint a difference. Especially in modern use, they're very similar. Yeah, if anything, ze is more like on the side of informing others, whereas zo is more on the side of asserting information to someone else or yourself. So, ikuze. It's like, let's go, ikuzo. Yeah, I would say, if anything, it's probably a good way of thinking about it. Like, ikuze, you're more relaying this to someone else, where ikuzo is more like you're just assertively stating it, but you could also be saying it to yourself. But they are definitely pretty similar. In a lot of cases, you can probably use them kind of interchangeably and kind of in certain ways as well. So, yeah. That's basically it. I think that's kind of it. これ以上持ってもしょうがないし、もうさっさと行こうぜ. Yeah, let's go. 行こうぜ. Like I said, you rarely hear zo used with volitionals, in my opinion. 食べようぞ. Yeah, I would say that with volitionals especially, ze is very common when zo is not common at all. Like, 行こうぞ is not something I hear, but 行こうぜ is something I hear all the time. So yeah, take that like you want, take that as you will, I guess. That's definitely one difference I can think of, but yeah. Have you no spine? I don't know how to... Manukedo. I don't know. How would you say have you no spine? You have no spine. Alright. That... Yeah, we've talked about what. So what was the first particle we talked about? And how it has basically two different versions. A feminine version that is mostly used in more formal speech, and a casual version, which is originally from Kansai-ben, which has come more into use. The difference between, like, 本当に困ったわ and 困りますわ. Basically the difference. How about how dare you? よくぞ来た. Yokumo. How dare you is a weird thing, because yokumo is kind of hard to explain. But yeah, I would say, yeah, yokumo is used. Yokumo yatte kureta na. I don't know. That's a whole different thing, I think. I don't know if we should talk about that now. That, ladies and gentlemen, was basically our overview for Gobi Part 2. Hey, if you missed it, okay, don't worry about it. I'm catching up on YouTube uploads as well. So, the full playlist, by the way, you can find here. JP 101, all assorted into one fine playlist for you, for your viewing pleasure. Give it a go. We've done over 30 lessons. So if you want to go back and check that out, that's the place to go. And generally, I do this every Wednesday. And that was it. That was the lesson for today. A quick overview what we've done. Let's see. I will quickly jot down. I like the word jotting something down. It's nice. Eric Kinks. I don't know if I'm reading that right. Thanks for the follow. Follow. Arigatou gozaimasu. How long have you been learning Japanese? Almost a decade. I say almost. I don't actually know. I've lost count. So it may be a decade now. I don't know. I've stopped counting before. I've kind of stopped caring about when I started before a decade. So yeah. Keigo on YouTube channel. Yes and no. I have some on basic Keigo. I don't have any specific lessons on like the other Keigo forms, but I will probably get to it at some point. Keigo is a whole thing. You know. Thanks for the lesson. Yeah, let's do a quick overview. Okay, so which particles, which gobi did we talk about today? We talked about wa. Okay, wa in its more masculine, more feminine form. Both of them. We talked about na. 3 usages of na. Number 1, a replacement for ne, which is a bit more, a little bit more masculine. We've talked about using it as a negative imperative, and we've talked about using it as the short version of the nasai command form. We've talked about to, which mostly we talked about the example nanda to, which is for sort of making very strong questions and sort of like questioning what other people say, right? So like, yada to, you say you don't want it? that kind of thing. Hey, thanks for the follow as well. Tatsunikaru. Follow, ありがとうございます. Other things like Great Kanji Talk. The Great Kanji Talk is a good one. Yeah, it's such an old video at this point. I'm almost like tempted to make a proper video out of that. We've talked about no. No can be a question marker. It can be a explanatory marker. So that's kind of what we talked about. We've talked about sa, which is sort of a filler, or using it as a sort of asking for people to empathize with you, like saying like, you know, or like, these kinds of things. We've talked about ze, and we've talked about zo. I'm almost out of space here, but these are the ones we talked about today, quite a lot. Last episode, we actually only talked about yo and ne. Now, yo and ne are pretty complex, which is why we took like a whole hour just talking about those. Today, we got all of these others done. Marvelous. Sad that I'm 1 hour later, totally didn't notice. Yeah, I'm sorry, I changed my stream slot again. That's kind of my fault. But I was like, dude, I have to stream earlier because what we do after these lessons is generally we go on the Discord server and we read together. There's a short form for Nasai. It's mostly done by female speakers, but you will hear it. You will hear it by female speakers that are speaking more casually. You'll hear it like ikina, like come here. In my experience, it is mostly the middle-aged women that would use that kind of form. You also see it in fiction sometimes. Like one person I can think of right now in fiction that uses it all the time is Ozen from Made in Abyss. She uses it all the time when she's commanding Riko and Frick Regu. When she's ordering them around in her little upside-down fortress, she uses it all the time. That's one example. Often these sort of commanding but a little bit older female characters in fiction will use it a lot. But also in the real world, older women tend to use it. You mean like Stacy's mom? I don't know. Maybe. Haven't talked to Stacy's mom in a while. So we'll have to see. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that was it. That was lesson 34. Thank you very much. After this, we still have stuff to do. Hey, Cisco, thank you for the Prime. 4 months in a row. I really appreciate that. After this, we still have stuff to do. We are going to meet up on the Discord server, which is here. You can join our Discord server. We're going to meet up on the Discord and we're going to read together. That's on the schedule for later. So thank you very much for watching this lesson, and I'll see you next week for the next one. Haven't decided on a topic yet, but you know, I'll figure it out. You know me.